Hey everybody, it's September 16th, 2018, Sunday evening. Another very hot and humid day here. Not as bad as it's been. We're going to be getting the remnants of Tropical Storm Florence. I guess it's going to hit us on Tuesday, but right now the forecast is only calling for maybe some localized flooding in low-lying areas, 2 to 4 inches of rain. We got a lot of rain earlier in August, and the ground's pretty saturated, so we'll see how it goes. I'm not too worried about it. The other big news up here in New England, which would have been probably the biggest national story, except that it was usurped by the hurricane down there in the Carolinas. Hurricane Florence kind of stole the thunder of... Yeah? Good night. Love you too. Yeah. So the other big story here in New England, here in Massachusetts, was the gas explosions that happened up in Lawrence and Andover, Massachusetts, and North Andover, that area of those three communities. Details are still coming out on that now, but I guess the short story is that the gas company up in that area was doing some sort of upgrading or testing or something that was going on, because they had sent a notice out apparently to customers. So anyways, apparently they were doing something with the gas system, natural gas piped into these houses in the community, commercial buildings and whatnot. And what we're hearing now is that for some reason they overpressurized the system, or they allowed excessive pressure to build in the system, and houses started blowing up. There were reports, they said at one point there were as many as 20 structures or houses on fire at the same time. People who witnessed what was going on said it felt like a war zone, that you'd have a house blow up on a street, and then, not too long, minutes later, you'd hear another explosion the street over. And so it was quite a horrendous situation. The fire chief even described it as Armageddon. One of the fire chiefs for one of the communities described it as it was like Armageddon, I think is what he likened it to. You can imagine how horrifying that must be, because when that's happening initially, you have no idea what's going on. And unfortunately, a young man who had just gotten his driver's license and was celebrating was in a car, I guess in a driveway at a home, and the home collapsed, and or this big chimney collapsed and fell over on the vehicle that he and his friends were in, and he was killed. So that's that's unbelievable. Freak accident. You get all these houses blowing up, and here's this young man, he's killed in a car. So, well, all right. So on to what this video is supposed to be about. This is supposed to be a flea market finds video. I just felt like making a video. I hadn't had a chance to make videos lately. I did a little mini project, the cap for the power steering reservoir on the Oliver 770. I did get a few items, so let's get right into it. I got a Salvation Army pick, not tool related, but I just wanted to share it with you because I thought it was a hell of a score. And I've got a one tool store buy. I've got one item left over from the flea market in Wareham, Mass. that I hit while camping. I didn't score anything there except this one item. And then last week I managed to scare up some time and headed out to the Brimfield flea market in Brimfield, Massachusetts, which is it's one of the largest flea markets in the country. It's run 3 times a year. There's a spring, a summer, and a fall show. I went to the fall show. I went there on a Friday, that previous Thursday, it was so hot and humid and miserable that unlike the typical fall show, people were likening it to the July shows where people just aren't buying because everybody's just too tired and hot, walking around like zombies. So Friday, it rained a little bit in the morning as I was heading out there, just a light sprinkle, kind of cooled things off so that traffic going in was pretty lively. But I still heard a lot of dealers saying that, yeah, things were kind of dead. Not the greatest show, I guess. But I scored. I went there on the off chance that I might be able to score some machinist items. As many of you guys know, a lot of these machinist tools are antiques that are functional antiques. In other words, they qualify as antique collectibles but are still usable every day for a lot of us weekend warrior home hobby type machinists. So let's check out the Salvation Army pick. Let's jump right in. So occasionally I'll hit my local Salvation Army store and I'll walk through and see if there's anything that interests me. And I have actually bought I've bought footwear there before for both myself and the kids. It's not unusual to find brand new shoes or sneakers there on the shelf, or sneakers that look like they have barely any wear on them. And I'm an odd sized, I've got a wide foot, but I'm only a size 10, which I'm 6'1", so for a guy my height, my feet are kind of short but wide. Go figure. So anyways, makes it kind of tough for me to buy a lot of the shoes that I want to buy unless I'm ordering from a better company where I can get these wide sizes. So anyways, yeah, really, I mean, like I'm trying to justify why the heck I go there. I go there because I like good stuff cheap. So I also like my morning cup of joe, and I've got a Keurig K-Cup coffee maker upstairs that my wife purchased for me, and it's a smaller model. You can't put a large you can't put a large travel mug underneath the spout even when you take the tray out. The reason why she got me the smaller model was because it takes up less space on the counter. She didn't like the idea of the big ones on the counter that take up a lot of space. Well, that model also, it does not have a reservoir for water, so you have to basically lift the lid, pour in 1 cup of water, put your cup underneath, put the K-Cup in, close it, start it, and it just brews. There are really no settings, nothing you can do as far as fool around with how strong or weak the coffee is. It's a one-trick pony, so to speak. It takes a standard K-Cup size and nothing else. Enter the Keurig Hot 2.0 K425 Plus series. So I spotted this, and I looked in there, and I saw the unit was in there, and I was like, oh, wow, a Keurig. Now, with all electronics and things that plug in that store, all of them are sold as is. So consequently, for the most part, usually the prices are pretty cheap because you're really taking a chance whenever you buy something there. However, they've actually got all the stuff on shelves, and it's not usually hard to find an electrical outlet behind those shelves or somewhere. So you can kind of plug stuff in and give it a quick little test. I mean, some stuff you're not going to know until it works, until you get it home, really get to run it through its paces, like this, for instance. However, you could at least turn it, you could at least plug it in and see if it turns on, if it lights up, if you see some signs of life, if you see smoke coming out of it, and that can happen. But I've scored some things there in the past. I got a nice guitar amplifier out of there one time. I got a bass guitar out of there another time. But anyways, I figured, hey, maybe I'll get this. And I thought, well, maybe this is like a real obsolete model because the Keurigs have been around for a while now. So I pull out my phone and I check and I run the model number. And sure enough, this model is still available on Amazon, and it's selling new for about $160. So I was like, that would indicate to me that this was a pretty pricey model. It was a pretty decent model. And here's the clincher. As I said, sold as is. They put it out on August 1st, 2018, which I had just scored this, I think, the first week in September, or maybe the last week in August, but it had been out there for a few weeks and nobody even bought it. One of the problems was they didn't have it out on the shelf. It was in this box sitting on the floor. They kind of had a bumper crop. The inventory was kind of high. Anyways, I don't know if you can see this or not. The price is $4.99. For $5, I'm taking a chance. I did take it out and plug it in, and I did find one issue right off the bat, I believe, and I'll get to that in a moment. But you know what? Why don't we save monkeying around with this for the end of the video, and we'll just set this aside, because some of you guys might not give a rat's patootie about Keurig coffee makers. So we'll put this off to the side and let's dive into a couple other the small items I got to go through. So there was a flea market in East Wareham, Mass that I used to like to go to years ago. On the weekend, it was an indoor flea market, and on the weekend though they would have people come and they would set up in the parking lot, and I actually bought a couple of decent things there while camping, because I'm not going to drive all the way out there just for that. But if I'm already out there, sometimes we'd hit this thing for, on a Saturday morning and walk around, see what we can find. Well, that flea market unfortunately has gone way downhill. The indoor flea market part of it is really, the inventory is about as fresh as a Foghat concert, and I don't, the stuff is either overpriced or just not of any interest to me. But there was a vendor there who had a lot of books, and my wife actually found a few of the types of authors that she likes to read, and paperbacks in really good condition. And so we asked the woman how much the books were, and I think she said paperbacks were 50 cents and hardcovers were $1. So I happen to spy this book. Okay, this is Electronic Devices, Electron Flow version, 2nd edition by Floyd. Now, I don't know who Floyd is. It's not Pink Floyd. But I noticed, based on this label right here, based on this, $68. I had a very good inkling that this is a college textbook for a college basic electronics course. This would be a course that an electronic engineer would take probably first year. And I just kind of, it's weird. I like reading technical manuals and things like that. I don't know why. I mean, some of the stuff I read, I can't even apply it to things that I do. But long story short, a lot of this stuff I learned when I was in Voctech school for electronics. But I could use a refresher course. I've been thinking about maybe getting back into a little bit of electronic work. Namely, repair and restoration of some of the older radios and amplifiers that I have in my collection. Things that I picked up that I always said, well, I'd like to go through them and do some work to them. So anyways, the first whole part of the book here is electron theory, which is typical in a lot of these. But there's also a lot of just really good information in here. Basic information on theory of operation of electronics devices. So, not to bore you to death with this, but just going to run through the names of the chapters really quick, just so you can get an idea of what we're looking at here. So we've got Introduction to Semiconductors. Talks about how the PNN junction works. Diode application. This is interesting. Diode application. It talks about uses for diodes: half-wave rectifiers, full-wave rectifiers, power supply filters, diode limiting and clamping circuits, voltage multiplier circuits, blah blah, 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 blah. There's even a troubleshooting section. Special purpose diodes, your Zeners, your varactors, your optical diodes. Bipolar junction transistors. Good information. Bias circuits. How do you bias a transistor circuit? You know, which gets into like class of operation of amplifiers and things. Small signal bipolar amplifiers. Common emitter, common collector. These are the different types of stages you might find in different types of equipment. Oh, here we go. Power amplifiers. Class A amps, Class B, Class AB push-pull amplifiers, Class C amplification. Field effect transistors. Amplifier frequency response. So this talks a little bit about design work with designing amplifier circuits. Thyristors and other devices, so they're just going to throw in all of, there's your Schottky diode, unijunction transistor, phototransistor, optical couplers. Then it gets into your real basic early digital electronics here. Op amps, basic op amp circuits, oscillators and phase locked loops. This gets into your frequency generation and synthesizing in your receivers and transmitters. Voltage regulators. So kind of cool. In case you're wondering, this book is copyrighted 1996. So this would have been over 10 years after I had graduated from high school electronics. But it's already over 20 years old. So, but still a lot of really good information in there. And actually what I'd love to do is I'd love to get even an older text like this that has some vacuum tube theory in it. And you're probably wondering, what the hell you want to do with vacuum tube? Well, classic amplifiers, old radios, all running on vacuum tubes. So, anyways, transmitters, a lot of them use vacuum tubes. All right, but anyways, I thought that book was a real score for a buck. And the other thing that I got a kick out of was that this book was marked for $68. And if this was like when I went to college, there were no discounts. You went to the college bookstore to buy your books, which were basically, you were told it was required for the course. So you had to buy the book. And then you had to pay whatever the sticker was, and that's why it was $68 for this book. And because they had you over a barrel, you know. And then we had with the advent of, you know, the internet marketplace and all of that, which killed a lot of brick and mortar stores. All of a sudden, it became really tough to justify this price gouging, which is what this was. This was price gouging, pure and simple, and it was gouging the people who, many of them, you know, were taking second jobs to put themselves through school, and were having to pay this. You know, I guess I'm kind of getting off on my soapbox there, right? All right, next item. So I hit the used tool store in the city a couple of weeks ago, and I was going through, and I spied this device right here. And, well, first I'm going to give you a second just to look at it, bask in its glory. We've got kind of like a blade, curved blade almost, mounted in this curved arm. We've got this almost like a star wheel with different sized, almost look like cutters, and they are pretty sharp on the end. Okay, we got a little knob here so that when you adjust this where you want it, you can lock it. We've got this, almost acts like a depth stop or something. Okay, right. This has got a ratcheting mechanism here, so you can open this jaw up and then clamp it down. Okay, so going to give you the answer and show you that I overpaid for this and didn't realize it in 3, 2, 1. So it's a KD Tools number 2477 piston groove cleaner. This was one of the rare instances where I overpay for something, or pay pretty much fair market value, which
I didn't have a need for a piston groove cleaner. In fact, I do what a lot of guys do. I use an old piston ring. I break off a part of the old piston ring and use that to clean out. Now, this is going to do a much better job of that. But I just don't do a lot of engine rebuilding, so it doesn't make sense for me to go out and spend money on something like this just to have it sit in the drawer until that one day in the future I use it, unless I get a really good deal on it and feel like, oh, I justify that because, hey, you know what? In the end, if I wanted to, I might be able to sell it for more than I paid for it. Well, that's not the case here because one simple reason. I forgot my cell phone in the truck. I usually have my cell phone with me, and when I see something like this sitting there, if it's not one of these things I gotta grab quick because he just put it out, which this wasn't, usually the first thing I'll do is I'll pull up and I'll Google this and I'll find out what these are selling for used. So you see, it's $15 is what I paid for this thing. Well, it turns out I've seen them sell on eBay for as low as like 10, and 15 or $20 with free shipping is also not unusual, and occasionally you'll see one go for a little bit more. So I didn't get robbed. I didn't get robbed. Still, KD tool is a good quality tool, and it is going to be something that will be handy the time that I do need to actually use it. But the reality is, I wish I had checked this before I bought it and wished I had still had my $15. All right, that's the only thing I bought at the tool store that day. On to the Brimfield Flea Market in Brimfield, Massachusetts. And I knew that if I scrounged and looked long enough, I would find the occasional machinist item. And I had hoped that I actually might find more than I expected, but unfortunately, I was not able to. The place is huge. Okay, there's field after field with hundreds of dealers, and there's actually in total is like probably 1,000 dealers there or more. And they all have their little tent set up with their tables out and all kinds of stuff. So you can imagine, even if you really know what you're looking for and kind of zero in, you can kind of move sort of quickly, but still you got to go up and down all these rows, look in, pop your head in, look around. It takes time. So I started early in the morning down one end of this large stretch of Route 20 in Brimfield, Massachusetts. It's on both sides of the road. I managed to get down maybe about halfway down one side and did like 3 or 4 major fields before I ran out of time because I had an appointment I needed to get to for 3 o'clock that afternoon, and I needed to get back here, change clothes and whatnot. So long story short, I only covered, I would say I covered about 30%. Well, not even that, maybe more like 25% of the whole thing. Within the first 45 minutes to an hour of being there, I found a vendor who had a lot of tools. And he had a lot of antique tools, vintage tools, and he had some modern tools. And then he had a couple of boxes with trays with prices on them. And there were some machinist items in there, but nothing really to get excited about. But then I happened to look at one box that said, I think it said items were $9 a piece, or 3 for $18, I believe is what it said. Well, I looked through the box and I snagged this one item, and then I was looking and realized there was nothing else in there I wanted. So I took the one item and I said, "You do $6 on this indicator?" And he thought about it for a second. He said, "Yeah." So this was my first purchase at the Brimfield Flea Market. It's a Starrett indicator. It operates very nice and smoothly. It's in really good shape. The major drawback is it has this unusual back on it, which has this, it's not a dovetail, but it's got this groove with a threaded hole in it. And this back would indicate that this probably came off of some sort of a stand, some sort of a height gauge or something. Okay, So that makes it a little unusual. It's actually it's a number 25-441 jeweled movement. It has a 1-inch overall range, and it's a thousandths indicator. So it's got 1-inch travel, and it also has this auxiliary handle on here, which also makes me think that, again, sat in some sort of a stand, and the idea was that was used for inspection. So you would push this down, put the part under, drop this down, take a reading, push it, put another part under there and drop it, and just do that all day long. It's got some, what I thought initially was some scratches up here on this plastic right here, but actually, let me take a second to see if that cleans up. Hey, how about that? That cleaned up nice. There's a little something right here in the corner, but that is actually in really sweet shape. So this was my second best score of the day for $6. Okay. Probably going to have to sell this item only because of the back. Unless I might actually have an extra back. So I might be able to actually take this back off and replace it with a back that has a more standard type of mount on it. But I think I already have a Starrett like this one, so I don't really need this. I just couldn't let that sucker sit there and get banged around that box anymore when I could take it home for $6. I also got no point on here. That's okay. So anyways, that was the first buy of the day that I was really, and I was actually very pleased with that. Then I hit kind of a dry spell. Probably went for the next hour, an hour and a half maybe, and didn't find anything, except I did come across, of all things, the last thing I expected to find out there. I came across a rotary table, and it was a Troyke, or Troyka, Troyke, rotary table. It was a small one, probably about that big. I would estimate maybe like a 10-inch. And it was a really early one. The reason why I know it was really early was because instead of just saying Troyke on it, it actually said the Alfred, like whatever his middle initial is, Troyke Company or something like that. I've never seen one badged like that. It had to be really early. Rusty, really nasty shape. And I just, I said, well, I've got a Palmgren, and I think I've got a Asian import. Well, the Palmgren's probably Asian too. I don't know. But anyways, I got a couple of rotary tables, and I always thought, well, I'd like to get one a little bit bigger. This one probably isn't any bigger than my Palmgren, but it's a Troyke, better quality. So I was like, is it worth? If I get that for like dirt cheap. He wanted $90 for that thing. So I kind of shrugged and thought, geez, boy, I'm glad I don't have to carry that out of here. So I moseyed on, and then I did find another dealer who had a few things, and I was able to score this. Okay, this has been cleaned. Obviously, it had quite a bit of rust, I think, on it here because it's got some bad pitting. All right, but somebody took the time to clean it up. And this is a contour gauge. Okay, so it's a set of, radius gauge, really, radiuses, and it has the radiuses in fractions. So this is a 9/32 radius. This is a 5/16, yada yada yada. Then we get another set on this side, more sizes on this side here. Okay. All right, and this is a Starrett, model number 272B. And I think that the 272 was a series, and I think they had the B and the C, and they might have an A with different sizes. I'll have to check. I think I have this one or ones like it. But I got the guy to take $5 for this, so I thought I did really well on it. And I figured that it was worth 10 or 15 bucks. And come to find out, it's pretty much like, no, it's really not. If I needed one of these, $5 is a great price for one. But the fact that I already had one, pretty sure I already have one. Actually, I just checked it. I don't seem to be able to put my hands on my radius gauge set that I have that's like this. So maybe I didn't have one of these and just thought I did. I don't know. What I've got is I've got the more traditional radius gauge sets where they actually sit in a plastic holder. I've got a couple of the Starrett ones, and I've got I think a Lufkin one. Um, so, well, maybe this will go in my box. Well, then I see now I don't feel as if I end up keeping it, I won't feel as bad about paying $5 for it. Plus, somebody already went through the trouble of cleaning it for me. All right, so then after I bought this, pickets got pretty thin again, and it must have been an hour and a half, 2 hours later, I ended up coming across this vendor, and I spied something he had there, and I thought, oh, boy, do I really want to buy that thing? Yeah, he's probably going to want too much money for it. So then he ended up saying, yeah, see, I'm not showing you yet, right? Got a little surprise. You guys are going to love this. This is the deal of the day, I think. So I'm like, well, what are you going to get for it? I forgot what he said he was asking. And he said, yeah, talking about how he was getting ready to pack up. They were going to probably leave early. He was thinking he might not even stay all Saturday. It was already late. It was already about 1 o'clock on Friday afternoon. Actually, it was like 1:30 Friday afternoon, and I'm already thinking, okay, if I buy this, I've got to basically stop looking and start walking back to where I parked, which is about a 10-minute walk away, and then drive through heavy foot traffic all over the roads back to here to get this thing loaded up and then get back to town, which was about a 40-minute drive out of there, okay, because of heavy traffic again. So I was really kind of like, yeah, not too warm about the idea of buying this thing. Part of me wanted it, and part of me knew that if I got him down to a low enough number, I was going to have to take it. So what ended up happening was we got to talking. I think as I was leaving, I said, well, I know you really don't want to load that heavy thing up again. I said, I almost feel embarrassed to say this. I said, would you take, embarrassed to admit to you guys that I said this to this guy. I said, you take $20 for it? And he's like, nah. He's a nice enough guy. He didn't say go pound sand. He didn't get, upset with my offer. And then he surprised me. He came back and he said, but I take 40. And I was like, ooh, now he's got my attention. $40. I said, well, how about split the difference? So I was at 20, you're at 40, $30. He said, 35. I said, you got a deal. I said, as long as I can drive in here to pick this up. He said, oh, yeah. Tell him up at the front gate, because normally you got to pay for admission to these places and pay for parking. So he said, yeah, tell the guy at the front gate you're just coming in to pick this up, and he'll let you through. So I went back, got my little Dodge Dakota, came back, pulled into this thing and loaded this thing up, got it home, got it down the cellar stairs, got it on a roll around, sitting over there on the floor, about 6 inches off the floor on one of those roll around dollies, and that's where it's going to sit for a while until I get around to doing something about it. So I'm going to take a pause right here, reset the camera position so that instead of having to haul that thing up here on the bench, we're just basically going to look at it right down there on the shop floor. Ta-da! So what we have here is another early Troik or Troika rotary table. This one, however, is not as early as the first one. It doesn't say Alfred Troik on it. It has the more typical Troik manufacturing or whatever label on it. I'll try and get a close-up of that in a moment. Got a lot of flash rust on it, but I think it's going to clean up pretty nice, actually. And it's got quite a bit of play, but it moves freely. And when I flipped it up and looked underneath, I could see that the worm gear assembly and everything had fresh grease on it. Looked like white lithium grease, maybe. So someone apparently had either greased it up in order to free it up because maybe it was frozen, or they were putting grease on it for maintenance. I don't know. This right here is the lock. Table lock seems to work perfectly fine. This is strictly a horizontal unit. The only thing that would have made this a sweeter score is if this was what they call an HV, or horizontal vertical unit. The horizontal vertical units have a bracket, like the casting sticks up on the side here, and it's got these slots also on the side. And the idea being is that you could tilt the whole thing up and stand it up on its side on your milling machine table and use it that way. I do have a horizontal vertical model, but it's a very small one. This one, bear with me a second. All right, so this is a model BH12. So I'm not sure what the B stands for, but H is for horizontal, and 12 it's a 12-inch diameter table. So it's larger than my palm grin by, I think my palm grin's either a 10 or an 8. That's probably a 10. So it's only a little bit larger than my palm grin, which might not sound like that big of an improvement. But the key here is that this is a much higher quality table. This is a much more rugged table. The thickness of the top here and the thickness from the bottom of the slot to here actually makes this a much stiffer table on the top. Now, before I put this thing back on the let me just give you a look at underneath here. There's the worm. Okay, the worm gear assembly there. You can see the yellowish white grease is probably lithium grease. You can see the remnants of the paint that they use on the casting. Okay, this bottom looks like it's in pretty good shape. It'll clean up, I think, just fine. This looks like, this must be how this comes apart. This looks like it probably unthreads off of this collar and allows that whole thing to be disassembled. So I don't know what this big screw here is for. Looks like it's really been cammed out by putting something in there and opening it over time. I'm wondering if this might be where you put the grease in. There's also a little oil cup here, and there's a little oil cup here. As far as wear goes, I don't know what is beyond acceptable for one of these things, but if I bring this to over and then I come back to 0, might be a little hard to see. Okay, then if I go back in this direction until I actually feel it engage again, it goes from 0 to 20. Now if this were a lathe, I would think, well, that's 20 thousandths of free play in that assembly. But because it's a rotary table, I honestly don't even know what this means. I don't know if this means 20 degrees, or is this 20 minutes of arc? You know, minutes and seconds, which are fractions of degrees. So I don't know if that's, you know, excessive or not. For something this age, maybe that's normal, and maybe that's something we can live with. I can live with it, and the reason why is because I could still do a lot of operations with this thing, and I'm just going to treat it the way I treat taking up into account free play in my travel on my end tables on the milling machine. You know, make sure you always come back to that. So for instance, if I was going to use this for something, and if I came down over here to 0 clockwise, I would try and make sure that I make all of my revolutions continuing in clockwise direction. You know, so, but it does move nice and freely. It does lock when I lock it. So I'm very pleased with that. On the back here, I've got the more traditional, right in the casting there, troika, Troyke, troik or troika or troike, I don't know. I honestly don't know the proper pronunciation of that, so I apologize if I'm offending anyone's sensibilities. But anyways, yes, I think this rust is going to clean up. Certainly going to clean up to make this more than serviceable enough for my purposes here. It's going to be a nice addition to the mill. So here's the one I had been using. This is my Palmgren 10-inch. So you can see the thing about this is this table is two-piece right here, and these this is not as thick. So what happens is, and I've actually had this happen, when I use these T-slots to clamp down something to this surface, I can actually put too much clamping pressure on this, and the table will become hard to turn. And what happened, the reason why is what's happening is, if you put too much clamping pressure on this, it can actually distort the table. So the surface of the table will lose its flatness. So you'd think you wouldn't be able to do that, but trust me, it's happened to me. I was like, why the heck is this thing so hard to turn? And then I realized that, just quite by accident, I happened to realize that when I would loosen the clamping pressure on the T-bolts, that I could turn it freely again. This is a horizontal vertical. So you can see here, it's got the places just like that troika I just showed you to clamp it down laying flat, but then I can also flip this whole thing and it'll stand on this side, and then the table becomes vertical. So I'm probably gonna end up having to keep this table. Well, maybe not. I say maybe not because buried over here in the dark recesses of the shop on the bottom shelf, because it weighs a ton, I have a super spacer. And a super spacer it's kind of like a horizontal vertical rotary table that instead of having a table, it has a good sized chuck on it. And I can't think of too many operations that I would want to do where I would need a vertical rotary table that I couldn't probably get away with doing with this this super spacer. I also have this little rotary table, which is looks like it's an 8-incher. It's probably metric, but we call it an 8-inch. Anyways, this thing's this thing's a little funky. This has got it's a combination horizontal rotary table built into a XY table. So I can't think of why the heck I would need this, because if I've got the table mounted on my milling machine table, I've got my X and Y axis movement. So I figured this might have been actually designed for use on a drill press. I don't know. So this might be something that might be handy to somebody who wanted to be able to do that kind of work on a drill press. I don't think this has a maker on it, which is what I think led me to believe this was an import job. Yeah, it's got that classic, it's got a very import look to it. I think this was in the cabinet of tooling when I bought my milling machine. The cabinet came with a bunch of tooling in it. I think this was in there. But I don't think I've ever even used this once, so not really necessary to me. Well, so anyways, point is I was able to score for my $10 parking fee and all of my walking I did that day and my time searching. I was able to score that rotary table, that Troik rotary table, so pretty happy about that. And I guess that's really all I've got for right now. So we're gonna throw that Keurig up here and run that through its paces and see if we can't figure out what that needs or if it needs anything at all. So the first thing I noticed about this thing, and I feel obligated to mention, is that it's filthy. I mean, this is the drip tray. This is a removable tray Comes with this metal piece that sits on top here. Now, the idea is that if there's a mishap and there's an overspill, it collects in this little tray instead of going all over your counter. And then it's removable because if you have, like, this is my coffee mug, and if you have a really tall, like, travel mug, you can remove this and then you can fit your travel mug under there. At least that's the idea behind it. But clearly this came out of a house, it came off of somebody's counter, and they hadn't bothered cleaning this a bit. So it could possibly be that they just thought, well, that the people at the Salvation Army will clean the stuff up before they put it out on the sales floor. What they don't realize, at least at our local Salvation Army, is I think they get so much volume there, and the people at work there just don't have time to do that kind of thing. So if you want to do a good deed and donate something to Salvation Army, maybe do a little extra good deed and give the thing a little once over with a dust rag or something. Especially in a case like this where it's kind of really, it's a food type of product, a food prep type product. It's a beverage technically, but you know what I mean. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give this thing a little spritz up. Of course, the irony here is I might be just cleaning this thing up to throw it out. So I started this video a few days ago, and I talked about that they were getting hit with Hurricane Florence down south, and the remnants of it's now September 18th, Tuesday, and the remnants of the tropical storm that was Hurricane Florence originally is now making its way here into New England. So we are expecting thunderstorms and heavy downpours throughout the day. I mention this because I'm not sure if the camera's picking it up or not. But what sounds like a very poor drum corps is actually raindrops hitting the end cap on my chimney, my metal chimney flue for the boiler. That already looks better. For those of you wondering what I'm cleaning with, I'm using LA's Totally Awesome. It's one of my favorite degreasing general purpose type cleaners. This is an all-purpose concentrated cleaner degreaser spot remover, they call it. What's so awesome about this is that this is found in a lot of the dollar stores for $1. And I think I covered this in a past video. Sometimes you can find it, it's the spray bottle this size for $1. And sometimes they have the larger refills without the spray head on it for the same $1. So if you really want to maximize your value, you keep the spray bottle when it's empty and you buy the refills. I'm actually not going to worry about this stuff here because I'm going to take these removable parts, including the reservoir for water, and I'm going to wash those with soap and water, hot soap and water in the sink later. That's if this thing works. So the reservoir just picks up and removes like so. All right. And they're telling you your min and max of how much water you should have in there. It has a check valve built into the bottom here. So I think the first test we're going to do is we'll put some water in this and we'll put the reservoir on and make sure that it actually doesn't leak all over the place. Alright, first test is good. The check valve is holding, not a drop of water is coming out. And the way this works basically is when I insert this down in there, there's something that's going to push up on this little piece inside here, and that's going to open the valve. Alright. No signs of water running out on my workbench, so that's looking good. I'm going to plug it in. And we got a little In the LCD screen corner here, we've got a little standby or on-off logo that has lit up. So, let's see what happens. Oh, wait a minute. Before I even do that, I'm going to open this up and I'll show you what I was kind of talking about as far as that to me it looked like there's something missing here. So maybe if one of you guys own this model, you can tell me what the heck I'm missing. So when you open this up, it goes on. There's a warning up here to tell you that there's something sharp up here, which makes sense. There is a needle type device up here that actually punctures the top of the K-cup. So the K-cup has got a little plastic. It's a little plastic cup with the coffee and filter built into it, and it's got almost like a foil membrane on the top that has to be punctured for the hot water to be injected through it. But the problem is here, this area right here. This device is sitting in here right now. Okay, and it also is dirty. Again, because this is a removable piece, I'm going to end up taking this and washing it correctly. Not going to worry about that. So, but I'm not even sure how this is supposed to go in here. There is a little hole here on the bottom that doesn't look like it corresponds with anything when this closes, which is what makes me think that this does not go in here like this, even though it seems to fit in there like that. Seems more like it should go in. Ah, there we go. Goes in like that. Okay. That's probably how it was when I took it out. Huh, guys? Alright, so that explains this goes in like this, but then I think either there's supposed to be an alternative tray to this one that would take the K-cup. So this has a number 3 on it. Oh, so I might be missing 2 parts? Or does the number 3 mean that's the third option? Like, you know, because this thing supposedly can do regular K-cups, jumbo K-cups, and carafe. Alright, so to sum up, something's either missing or I have the wrong deal here. And I think this is supposed to come with just the one for doing... No, I don't know. Yeah, what the hell. I'll find an online parts list and I'll figure this all out afterwards. But for right now, I wonder if I can get it to do anything. Just to see if this thing's DOA or what. Alright, let's scope this out. Welcome. Preheating. That's the sound of boiling water I hear. So does this thing just sit on your countertop, kind of like an instant hot water maker where it just cycles on and off and keeps the water hot all the time so it's ready to go at a moment's notice? Or can you actually set a timer? Does anybody out there remember the Mr. Coffee Maker type coffee makers that had the analog clock on them? I do. That's right, boys and girls. Actual mechanical hands that moved, and you could set the clock. You could set the coffee maker to turn on in the morning. So when you came downstairs, the best part of waking up was Folgers in your cup. Oh God. I should be condemned to Maxwell House for that. Maximum security. I just finished my morning cup of Joe right here, sneaking into the picture. So I'm going to stick that under there just in case we have any weepage or flow or something. I don't know. Okay. Oh, look at that. What time does it think it is? It thinks it's 12:07 a.m. Lift to begin. Okay, I'm going to have to back the camera up so I have room to lift this up. All right, let's see. So if I pick this up, it's going to expect me to load something in here, and I believe if it's like my other one upstairs, it can sense when you did that. So if I just close this, it's going to still probably Let's see. Dispense hot water. Oh, so if I just want hot water, is that what the deal is there? What's this do? Oh, I can cancel that if I don't want to do that. If I wanted to just make some hot water, I guess I can do that. 6 ounces, 4 ounces. All right. Let's get 4 ounces of hot water. Wow, this has a very different sound to the pumping mechanism than my other model does. My other model makes a noise. This has got a whole different thing going here. Enjoy your hot water. All right. Oh, that's interesting. That water came out. There must have been some remnants of coffee in that tray, and it made a super weak. Interesting. So it knows if I'm just making hot water because I didn't put anything in there, I guess. All right, so that's all it can do, I guess, until I get some proper parts and pods to put in this thing. I mean, I don't see how I could put a pod in here. It just wouldn't stay put. There's nothing to keep it in the proper position, if you follow me. So, all right. Maybe before I close out this video, I'll, through the magic of time, I will pause the camera and it will appear like I instantaneously come back with all my answers. As promised, I am back with the full scoop. Okay, so the part right here, okay, this is part number 3. So if you're searching for this part, you actually go on and you say Keurig part 3. I know it sounds weird, but the problem is Keurig calls, this is number 3. What's missing is part number 1 and 2. Part number 1 is the actual part that the actual pod goes into, and it has a needle that sticks up in the bottom that punctures the bottom of the pod. And then part number 2 is like a framework that sits inside of, that sits in here. So part number 1 is pretty common replacement part. You can find them all over the internet for as little as $8. The problem is Keurig considers that part and part number 2, parts 1 and 2, as the pod holder assembly is what they call it in the manual. And when you search for pod holders, you find a bazillion listings for those organizers or things that sit on your counter to stick your little pods in so you can have all your varieties and stuff like that in there. So you got to kind of weed through a lot of stuff. And then when I figured out that, some of these guys figured out, since Keurig doesn't show any part numbers to speak of on their website, or in the parts in the owner's manual, they describe this as, they have call-outs in the diagram for K, L, and M or whatever. But anyways, this is part 3. So the other pieces that are missing would have also been embossed with a number 1 and a number 2. So some guys have figured out, hey, if you're going to sell these on eBay, these used parts, call them part 1, part 2. So, and a lot of guys are bundling part 1 and 2 together, because that apparently is how you have to get it if you're getting it direct from Keurig. So I looked that up and I found out there's a couple of guys on eBay right now that have good used parts, and they have a ton of them. So these are guys that must be just like scooping up wherever they're getting these things from, I don't know, stripping them and selling them in parts, because just like with ATVs and old motorcycles, oftentimes it's worth more in parts than it is as a whole machine. So do I want to bother doing that? I guess I will. I did find a guy who is actually right here in Massachusetts who's stripping these things, he's got like 104 of those part 1 and 2 assemblies in stock. And I'm sorry, it says I think he sold 104 and he's got over 10 in stock. So he's just obviously the go-to guy on eBay for a lot of these parts. And he's selling it for 21 bucks used for the 2 parts. Well, I'll show you. So here we go. This guy right here on eBay, he's calling it a genuine Keurig 2.0 OEM replacement parts number 1 and number 2 for the K200, K300, K400, and K500, which I believe the K245 is in the K200 series. So I think that's what they're talking about there. So I'm pretty darn sure that this is what fits in here. So there's the, you can see there's actually the needle down in the bottom there on that. Okay, clearly that's used. So there's the 2 parts, parts 1 and 2. Okay, there they are put together. And he's probably got the best deal going right now. Looks like he's got 104 that he sold. He's got more than 10 available. So we're just gonna go with that. Yeah, so it's 21 bucks. Because he's right here in Massachusetts, it's gonna be standard shipping, only $3.75. Probably gonna throw the thing in a padded bag, and $24.75. So by the way, the only thing that was cheaper was this one here. Actually, it's only 30 cents cheaper. And I think the reason why I didn't go with this was because this guy was further away. So for the 30 cents, I'll just go with the guy who sold a whole ton of them in the past. Because if this comes in and there's a piece broken, I know that I could probably just let this guy know, and he's got a bazillion more. You can just throw another one in the mail to me. And then from there, the prices go up. There's $27.75 with free shipping, which if you're further away from Massachusetts, that might be a better deal. And then the other one I toyed with was this one here. He's $29.95 or best offer. So my thought was, hey, maybe I'll just make an offer to this guy for less than $24.75, like 22 bucks. Problem with that is then he'd have to take $7.95 off, which I'm pretty sure he would probably refuse, because if you look at his listing, it says that he's actually sold for these. And if you go and look in, according to this, people are just not even bothering. They're just paying him the $29.95 for this item. So the interesting thing about this one, this listing though, is this one actually does say 2 views per hour. It's probably me. Part 1 and 2. But if you look at his photographs, if you look closely, you will notice part 3 is actually in the photograph. Matter of fact, he even goes as far as to show them separated here. So if I were bidding on this and I needed part 3 and it didn't come in, I would be a little miffed. There's part 3 right there. It's its own separate photo. So what this really is this should be parts 1, 2, and 3, which if you need all 3 parts, then the $29.95 is a good deal. But I don't need part number 3. So my thought was, I could make him an offer and say, well, I don't need part 3, just ship me 1 and 2 for 22 bucks. But I just, why bother? Some of you might be thinking, why did you even bother paying the $24.75 for these parts at all for a used coffee maker? Well, $24.75, and then I bought the thing for $5, so I'm into it for $29.75. Now, I think this is actually a discontinued model by now, but the interesting thing is you can still find it on Walmart's website. Of course, Walmart acts as a web portal for a lot of different sellers. So it's kind of like when you go to the Sears website, it's not necessarily coming from Walmart. So if you look, this is seeing the small print right here, sold and shipped by Quick Supply. So this is probably some company that deals in buying discontinued. Hey, they got one left, $236.17. Yeah, nobody's going to buy that. And if we go to Amazon, again, more evidence that this is a discontinued model. If we pull this up, It actually talks about available from these sellers. It talks about, here's somebody selling a used one for $140 with shipping, or free shipping. $148 for a new one. So $148 is the cheapest new one you can get. And the prices go up, and you can see all the way up here. This person's asking for $204.98. So I don't know what this retailed for originally. I thought I found it at one point for like $180 or $160. But I found enough evidence to indicate to me that this was not a cheap coffee maker. So even though it's an older model, it still seems to be working. And I'm going to be into it for $30, so I'm not worried about it. All right, well, enough of that. You guys are probably bored stiff by me again. I hope not. I hope you guys are liking and sharing the videos. Always, I don't know, I guess it's all about subs. Right. So we've got over 6,000 subscribers. We're trying to edge towards 7. I'd love to get to the first YouTube recognized milestone of 10,000 subs by Christmas. I don't know, and we're already into past mid-September, so you never know. Sometimes there's a steamrolled snowball down the hill effect that the thing just grows bigger and gains momentum. That would be cool. But anyways, thanks again for watching another one of my videos. Take care.
Wow. Oof.
Hey, I'm recording down here.